have one of the Bay Area's leading voices in climate. Very excited to have Dr. Jonathan Foley joining us tonight. He's an environmental scientist and sustainability expert who is at Project Drawdown as the executive director. He's one of the top 1% most cited global scientists with 130 papers under his belt. I'm not sure what you do in your spare time. Has been writing articles for National Geographic, New York Times, Guardian, Scientific America, and many, many other publications. From 2014 to 2018, he was executive director of the California Academy of Sciences. And then last year, 2 years ago now, joined the Project Drawdown, which he will be introducing tonight. I think most people in the group probably know of Project Drawdown. What you may not have heard of is the new Project Drawdown Review, which was released a couple of weeks ago and is an update. So thank you so much for joining us. Very excited you're here.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me here tonight. I really appreciate it. And apologies, I do have a kind of a cough and thing like that I'll try to manage through today. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. And as was mentioned, we have provided a whole new update to Drawdown and an entirely new website and a lot of new things coming. So if you think you know Drawdown, check again and go to drawdown.org and you'll see a lot more and a lot more soon around climate solutions. We've been pretty busy. But tonight I just want to share some of our most recent work talking about climate solutions and see if we can get that presented to you tonight over some slides. So I think we're rocking and rolling here.
Yep, it looks it.
You see that all right? Okay,
Yes.
Very good. So yes, we're going to be talking about climate solutions and this concept we call drawdown. But before we get into that, this idea of climate solutions, you're all, of course, very familiar if you're with the Climate Reality Project, the kind of problem of climate change and why this moment in history is so incredibly unique. But just to kind of make sure we're on the same page, where we are today, whether it's our pandemic or climate change or other issues that we face, a lot of them result from this moment in history being unlike anything else we've ever seen, because we've seen this explosion in just the last few decades of not only human numbers, but also urbanization, the economy growing at unprecedented rates, and our advances in technology. And this time is so different than anything else, it really bears a little bit of thinking. For example, in the last 50 years, our population in just 50 years, more than doubled. Our economy, even including the last few days, grew over fivefold, adjusted for inflation. Our demand for food about tripled, our demand for water more than doubled, and our fossil fuel use almost tripled in just 50 years. Just to put that in perspective, why this time is so different, the last 50 years have seen more change than not only any other period in history, it's more change than all history combined. So we're really living in kind of an inflection point in all of human history that is unlike anything else we've seen. Naturally, this is also causing major disruptions to our planet. Climate change, but other things are also happening that are really unprecedented. For example, we are clearing forest all around the world, from this landscape to the left to the one on the right in just a few years. In fact, we've lost roughly 30% of all the tropical forest on Earth, which has been a crisis not only for biodiversity, but also for climate change. As we burn forest, it's the same thing as burning fossil fuels. They both release carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, contributing to climate change. We've also seen the decline of water resources around the world, including the Aral Sea. This isn't from climate change, this is from us overtaxing water supplies, in this case, diverting 2 large rivers in Central Asia to irrigate the Kazakh desert to grow cotton. So the footprint of humanity is more than climate change. It's widespread on our land, in our water, our biodiversity, and everywhere. So this is not just a climate crisis, it's an environmental crisis writ large. But climate change is one of the things that will kind of touch all the others, because the atmosphere doesn't respect boundaries or watersheds or biomes, it's everywhere. And as climate changes, so does everything else. So the changing of our climate, which I know you're all very familiar with, is a really big part of our future in terms of how we'll live and our security, our health, and our economy. Just to remind you, and if you've seen Al Gore's version of this, he has 300 slides to explain this one slide, usually, is that we are contributing to the rise of greenhouse gases, including CO2, but there are many others, that are warming the planet. We've actually known about this since about the 1850s when I began to draw this graph. In fact, the first person to link the increases in CO2 to warming the planet was a woman named Eunice Foote, F-O-O-T-E, who first published this in 1853. Tyndall from Britain usually gets the credit for it, being a white male from Britain, but he in fact published it 4 years later. It was actually an American woman who first published the scientific study about climate change, almost 170 years ago. So with this increasing CO2 levels, of course, we know we trap heat, and the world has warmed about 1 degree Celsius since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. So we've added 50% CO2 to the atmosphere. We've warmed the planet 1 degree. I think you're all very familiar with that. This is posing an incredible challenge to everything. Climate is what we might call a threat multiplier. It affects our economy, our health, our natural resources, our security. Everything touches climate. So our future is inexorably connected to the future of our climate, and we need to figure this all out. But I want to say right here, right now, if you see all the news about climate change, and especially during these other crazy times, it's very easy to lose hope. Don't do that. Climate change is absolutely not hopeless. We do have the resources, the ability, the tools to reverse climate change. We can stop climate change in the coming decades. And I'll show you how we can do it. It's just whether we choose to do it or not is the question, but we do have the tools. So this is not hopeless, it's a choice, and it's a choice we have to make soon. So even though things seem sometimes like they're getting a lot worse, I also want to interject a little bit of optimism here, because many things are also getting better at the same time, and we can build on those things to address climate change and build a better future. For example, during the last 50 years, we've become healthier. Despite the recent pandemic, overall, life expectancies have increased dramatically. 50 years ago, the average person in the world lived to be 55. Now it's about 71. We have much smaller families. Women on average 50 years ago had 5.1 children. Today it's under 2.3. We're much more literate. We're more urban. We're more mobile. We're more sophisticated. We're more technological, and we're less violent than we were in any time in human history. So some things are getting better while some things are getting worse. And when people ask me, you know, is the world going to be great, or is it going to be terrible? Is it going to be a Star Trek movie or a Mad Max movie in the future? I ask them, like, well, which future do you want? Because we ought to go out and build that. The future is not written yet, including the future of our climate. We get to decide what it is, and we have that agency to act and make it a better future. So let's see how we can do that, because I'm convinced that a better world, including with climate change, is still possible if we act now. So how addressing climate change will be central to our future? Absolutely. And that comes to what we do at Project Drawdown. Project Drawdown started off in the Bay Area. For those of you located here, it's now quite international. We no longer even have offices. We are a virtual organization. And we act as the world's leading resource for climate solutions. If you want to learn about climate solutions, we're your go-to place, and we want to help you. But what is drawdown? Why did we use that word? In fact, it can be a little confusing, but let me explain what it is. Drawdown looks at the level of greenhouse gases going up in the atmosphere. Right now, they're going up and up and up. Every year, they're kind of getting worse. And if we do nothing, or we continue on our present course, they'll just continue to rise. As we pump more pollution in the atmosphere, the levels in the atmosphere will rise, warming the planet, exacerbating climate change. But it doesn't have to be that way. We, in fact, can bend the curve and change our future. We can stop emitting greenhouse gases. We can enhance the sinks of carbon on land and in the ocean, and we can reach the moment of drawdown. Drawdown is the moment in the future when greenhouse gases stop rising, they stabilize, and begin to come back down again. Right now, that might be hard to imagine that being possible, but I guarantee that it is. we can reach this moment where greenhouse gases come back down again, bending the curve and restoring our planet eventually back to a more natural state. And that's our mission. Project Drawdown is we want to help the world achieve drawdown as quickly and safely and equitably as humanly possible. So how do we get there? Well, to get to anything, to solve any problem, first we have to understand it. So what is the problem? The problem is the buildup of these gases in the atmosphere. CO2 we talk a lot about, but there are other gases. In fact, there are 4 main families of gases, and I'm showing the historical rise of 3 of them: CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide. There's a 4th category of gases called fluorinated gases that we don't have as much historical information on. Where do these come from? Well, the big one we all know about, of course, is CO2 coming from fossil fuels. A lot of people just stop there and think that's what's causing climate change, and you would be 62% correct. About 62% of our warming right now, when we adjust the heating impact of different gases, their different chemical lifetimes and how much they affect our climate, 62% of climate change right now is being caused by burning fossil fuels. So if that were your only answer, you'd get a D-. It turns out there are other things causing climate change too, and we can't forget these. In fact, about 3 or 4% of climate change is caused by cement. Not the making of cement, not the energy used in making it, it's the chemistry of when cement cures into concrete, it actually emits carbon dioxide as a gas. In fact, if cement were its own country, it'd be the 3rd or 4th largest emitter of CO2 in the world. So don't forget about those industrial chemicals and concrete. We also emit CO2 from deforestation. Burning trees is the same thing as burning coal. It's made out of carbon, it makes CO2. So a lot of our greenhouse gas emissions come from deforestation, particularly in Brazil, Indonesia, and other places where we're still burning down forest. Another big greenhouse gas, methane, or CH4, comes from agriculture and from industry. Now, methane from agriculture, people know a little bit about. It comes from cattle, mostly, and sheep, lambs, things like that. Animals we call ruminants. They don't fart methane. Everybody thinks they fart more methane than other animals. They don't. They burp methane. And this is the only thing people seem to remember from my talk. But they burp a lot of methane because they got all these stomachs, 4 stomachs in a cow, where they're trying to process things like grasses and silage, and they burp methane as a byproduct of their digestion. So animals contribute a lot of that methane. So do landfills, and so does natural gas infrastructure, especially fracking and pipelines that might be leaking methane, which is also natural gas we burn in our homes for furnaces and hot water heaters and our cook stoves. So it's industry and agriculture releases methane, and that's a really powerful greenhouse gas. Then we have nitrous oxide, N2O. That's one a lot of people don't know about, but it comes from agriculture. It's when we overuse fertilizers or manure. Sometimes the nitrogen in the fertilizers and manure, under certain conditions, especially when we apply way too much, which we often do in industrial agriculture, it combines with water and air and forms nitrous oxide going into the atmosphere, which is a very potent heat-trapping gas. And finally, we got this weird family of gases called F gases, which are mainly used as refrigerants and industrial chemicals. They're called fluorinated gases, and they include hydrofluorocarbons, which replace the old chlorofluorocarbons, if you remember from the 70s, which were harmful to the ozone layer. We stopped producing ozone-harming chemicals, but we replaced them with ones that cause climate change, ironically. So we now have another generation of refrigerants, propellants, and other things that are still bad for the environment, and we need to change those too. In fact, those are poised to grow enormously in the future, as about 2 billion people in the world are now getting rich enough to buy their first refrigerators and air conditioners. And if those aren't disposed of properly, the gases in the coils can leak out, contributing to climate change. So this is the kind of climate change problem. We have to fix fossil fuels, absolutely. But we got to think about things like cement, deforestation, agriculture, again and again and again, and even industrial chemicals like coolants and solvents and weird things like that. So climate change is not just an energy problem, it's more than that, but energy is the biggest slice. So how do we begin to reach drawdown? How do we lower the level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere? Well, this is a good way to think about it. Think of the atmosphere as a thing in the sky. Like imagine a big bathtub in the sky that we can add things to and we can remove things from. There are inputs and outputs. Here's the inputs of greenhouse gases, what we call the sources of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. And they're actually pretty easy to remember. About 5 big sources cause 90% of climate change. Electricity is 25% globally. Food and agriculture and land use is almost 25%, 24 here. So right there, electricity and the global food system produce half of climate change. Then we have all industry, then we have transportation, and we've got buildings, the direct emissions of buildings. Buildings also use electricity and transportation. So 90% of climate change is just 5 things, folks: electricity, food, industry, transportation, and buildings. The remaining 10% is largely from the energy sector also, especially fracking, leaky natural gas, and the energy it takes to convert like crude oil into things like diesel and gasoline and other stuff. So that's the sources. This is what adds to the atmosphere's kind of problem of greenhouse gases. But you know what? That's not the whole story. It turns out that nature removes about 40% of those greenhouse gases for free, just automatically, very quickly, mostly on land, in forest, and then some in the oceans, mainly through photosynthesis and just kind of basic chemistry. And when you put those together, a whole bunch of stuff going into the sky and 40% of it coming out of the sky, it leaves about 60% there every year that's building up over and over and over again. This is the most important diagram you'll ever see about climate solutions. This is everything we can possibly do. 6 major areas of sources, 2 major areas of natural sinks. Maybe we could be clever and add some of our own on top of that, and overall of society. So if you remember any one picture in this talk, this is the one to remember. So let's walk through this. What we need to do to solve climate change is right now we're adding more stuff to the atmosphere than nature can remove, so it's building up. So greenhouse gases are going up in the atmosphere. But if we could bring the sources down, eventually bringing them to 0, hopefully by mid-century, if those start to go down and we keep nature intact, so that we see that the land and the oceans are healthy and can still take up the carbon that they used to, we can begin to bend the curve. We can actually take more carbon out of the air than is being put into the air. So what we have to do is kind of bring the sources to 0. We need to support nature so it can keep doing its job, and maybe a few other things, and we can achieve drawdown and stop climate change. That's the big picture. So let's walk through this together. What are the solutions to climate change? In our original work, we wrote a book a few years ago before I was at Drawdown. They listed about 100 solutions, but instead of listing them, I want to show you how they work and the families of solutions, how they kind of work together to achieve climate stabilization in the near future. So the very most important thing to do is stop emitting pollution, stop emissions. So bring them to 0. That is job number 1, no matter what. If your bathtub's overflowing in your bathroom, turn off the faucet, okay, before you pick up the mop. So let's work on the sources. These are the 6 major sources. 5 of them we can do things about right here, right now. And again, it's about 25% electricity, 24% from food, there's industry, there's transport, there's buildings, and there's everything else. I want to walk you through those first 5 and show you what we can do about it. So here in electricity, we can see how electricity is produced mainly still from coal and natural gas, and it's mainly used in buildings, industry, and everything else. So we can both kind of change the demand for electricity by efficiency measures and the way we make electricity by using renewables. So that's where the solutions come in. A lot of the drawdown solutions are about energy efficiency, how we can lower the demand for electricity by using smarter building systems, better industry, better building materials, and so on and so on. Energy efficiency can get us about, a third of the way or halfway there in this sector, are still things that pay for themselves immediately and we could do today. In fact, we should have done them back in the 70s and 80s. Then, in addition, we can shift the way we make electricity away from coal and gas towards renewables. And now renewables are either as expensive or cheaper than fossil fuels. So things like solar and wind are ready to go and can help bring down emissions a lot. There are other things too, like geothermal and biomass, methane capture, some aspects of nuclear. All of these could be low carbon or zero carbon ways of making electricity. So beyond efficiency and renewables, we also have to improve the electrical grid, more flexibility, maybe more microgrids, and also enhanced energy storage. We're going to need to do that too. And if we put it all together, this diagram shows the size of those solutions relative to each other. The bigger the circle, the more carbon it can prevent from going into the atmosphere. And sometimes we'll draw two circles, one that's bright, I don't know what color this is, kind of orange, and then a darker orange. That's the range of that solution. We looked at kind of a high estimate and a low estimate to kind of bound how big or small this might be. That range is kind of depends on technology and what we choose to do. So a lot of efficiency and wind turbines, solar, et cetera, could all play a big role here. Then we get to the food system. We know food's a big part of the climate problem, but people are sometimes surprised that the food system emits most of its emissions from three things: deforestation, especially in the Amazon and Indonesia; methane, again, those burping cattle and cows out there, mainly from animals, but also from rice fields; and then from fertilizers and manure, creating nitrous oxide. Everything else is less than 5%. So things like food miles, transporting food around the world, that's actually not a big player here, or is packaging, or is the energy used on farms or making fertilizers. Those are like in the 1% territory, but 10 times bigger would be things like deforestation and the combination of fertilizers and methane. So those are the big three things: deforestation, meat and rice, mostly meat, and fertilizers. That's where we want to focus a lot. So to fix the food system, again, efficiency is a good place to start. Don't use as much food, reduce food waste. In fact, that becomes like the #1 climate solution in a lot of our scenarios. Not all of them, but many of them, because about 1/3 of the food in the world is never even eaten. And that means 1/3 of the emissions tied to food is never even needed or necessary at all. And also eating a little less meat, or maybe a lot less meat, would help too. Yes, grass-fed beef might be good for climate change, but in America today and most of the world, in the United States, only 1 to maybe 3% of our beef is grass-fed beef. 97 to 99% of it is feedlot beef that emits a lot of methane and a lot of other greenhouse gases. So eating less beef, at least in the current world, is a really good solution. Maybe we can farm better too, but cutting back on beef and especially food waste would help a lot. Then we can protect ecosystems, especially forest and peatlands, wetlands, things that contain a lot of carbon that we're clearing for more agricultural land. Let's stop that and keep that from going in the atmosphere. And then we can farm better, farm in ways that reduce the emissions on agriculture. And later I'll show you some of them can even maybe suck carbon out of the air and put it into the soil and keep it there. But right now I'm more interested in reducing the emissions from farms themselves. And we put that together, and it turns out diets and food waste are the biggest things we can do, then protecting ecosystems and farming differently. This is a way to cut down dramatically those emissions from agriculture, which are really quite large in much of the world. Industry, I'll go through this more quickly. Most of the industrial emissions are around things like making steel and other metals. Cement shows up here. Polymers and chemicals. Plastic is about 1% of climate change is caused by making plastic and using it and disposing of it. Plastic's a much bigger habitat problem for the oceans and our beaches, but from a climate point of view, it's in the 1% range. It's not a big climate issue, but it's a much bigger issue elsewhere. So we got to address that. And then dealing with our waste. So solutions include better materials, like new kinds of cement that don't release CO2, maybe better kinds of plastics. Dealing with these refrigerants I keep on talking about, because they're super pollutants. If a coil of an air conditioner breaks and leaks that into the atmosphere, you've added a huge contributor to climate change without even knowing it. And of course, processing waste, more recycling, composting, taking waste materials, turning them to energy in various ways. There are lots of things we can do to kind of close the loop in a circular economy that can also help with climate change. And here's kind of the relative size of those solutions. Refrigerants matter a lot though, as does cement. Transportation, you can kind of see where we're going with this. Most of the transportation problem is on the roads. We hear a lot about flying. Flying right now produces 1.8% and falling right now, of course, but historically about 1.8% of our global emissions. That's important because a very small number of people cause most of those emissions, and we could do something about that. But it's not really a make or break thing for the climate problem. Road transportation is at least 5 times bigger than that. And I know the flying less community wants us all to stop flying, and maybe we should really work on that, absolutely. But if you're taking Amtrak instead of flying, you're actually emitting more per mile because our train system in America is dirty diesel-powered trains. Unless you're in the Northeast, between Boston and Washington, D.C., the trains we use in America on Amtrak actually emit far more than the average plane does per person per mile. So we don't have an easy solution there. We got to decarbonize our trains and our planes, as well as our cars. We got to fix all of this stuff. Again, first thing, let's be efficient with what we've got. If we have a car that still uses gasoline, make it a bloody hybrid or at least a Civic or something, right? Make it efficient. More efficient trucks, more efficient aviation. If we're flying planes still, make them at least more efficient. The airline industry has about doubled the fuel efficiency of their fleet in the last 25 years. Can they do more? Can they be more efficient? Let's hope so. And of course, we can shift to alternative ways of getting us and our ideas and our goods around, maybe walking more bicycles, more carpooling, public transit, and what we're doing tonight, telepresence. I think that's, I bet all of us wish about 2 months ago we bought a lot of stock in Zoom. And after this epidemic, I bet a lot of us are going to be doing a lot more telecommuting for things because we've gotten used to it. And then, of course, we can electrify whatever vehicles we have left, like cars and trains, and make them powered by, hopefully, renewable electricity. But even the current electrical mix is still better than individual cars powered by gasoline. So these are all the different kind of transportation solutions, and you can read about all these on our website too. Buildings, I won't go into too much here. Most of the building square footage in the world is still residential, about 2 to 1 to commercial and public buildings. And here we're talking about the emissions from buildings directly. Now, buildings consume a lot of electricity, but those emissions happen at the power plant. What we're here talking about is buildings emitting stuff directly, mainly in furnaces, in furnaces, hot water heaters, cooktops, and refrigerants. So again, building efficiency helps a lot, shifting our energy sources helps a lot, and addressing those bloody refrigerants helps a lot. So that's basically where we are with buildings. So those are the main sources. Again, think about electricity, food, transportation, industry, and buildings. Start with efficiency, shift to non-carbon ways of doing what you were doing before, and improve the overall system. That's kind of the meta pattern of climate solutions that we see there. But then on the other side of the equation, nature removes greenhouse gases for us, principally CO2. Nature doesn't remove N2O or fluorinated gases or really methane that much. Mainly we're talking about carbon dioxide sinks on land and in the oceans. In order for that to keep healthy, we have to make sure that the oceans and the forest of our planet are still healthy so it can still do their job. And maintaining these natural carbon sinks is going to be hard because we're tearing down rainforests, we're polluting and over-harvesting the oceans, and we're warming everything. So a warmer planet with more fires, more degraded forest, more deforestation, more plastic in the ocean, more overfishing, all that stuff may reduce those carbon sinks. I'm hoping we can keep them steady and in maybe some cases make them even a little bit bigger if we can. So principally the carbon sinks are on land, and that's through photosynthesis, building up trees and building up organic matter in the soil. And we can help carbon sinks by first, stop clearing them, reduce food waste and diets, protect and restore those ecosystems like we did in the agricultural areas, but also now adding ecological restoration, not just protecting the trees, which is job number one. Second job is to plant the new trees. You know that old joke, what's the best time to plant a tree? It was like 50 years ago, and the second best time is today. So its number one job is to keep the forest we have intact, and then we plant the other trees. Same thing with soils. Let's protect the soils we have before we worry about planting more soil carbon, but we can. We can also improve agriculture, use our working lands to put more carbon into trees through agroforestry and silvopasture, and into the soil through regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is getting a lot of interest these days, but it may not be as big as we think. There's still a lot of scientific debate there, but it looks very promising. We can also maybe use the degraded lands that have been just beat up and abandoned, and try to restore them with different kinds of regenerative techniques to help build up their biomass and soil carbon. That could be important too. And all these things can add carbon back to the system, kind of bringing carbon back home again, if you will, and that would be helpful as well. Oceans, it's a little harder for us to manage what's happening in the ocean because it's ocean chemistry, ocean kind of carbonate chemistry, which is building shells and coral reefs, and then the biology of the ocean. Those are the three ways carbon goes into the ocean. We can help the oceans along in many ways, but right now the only ones we knew how to quantify and put a number on is on coastal wetlands, like our mangroves and other systems are really, really important because they sequester a lot of carbon and they help protect our coastlines from storms. So it's kind of a twofer there. So here we put some numbers on coastal wetlands, but there may be other ways the oceans can help us as well that we still need to do more research on. And finally, there may be ways, right now they're mostly at the very pilot scale, but for us to engineer carbon sinks, things that can pull carbon out of the air and make them into new materials, or to lock them up geologically so they're not in the atmosphere ever again, at least in the near future. Those are not yet even showing up in the atmosphere at all. They don't even register in the economy or the atmosphere, but there are some promising technologies that might appear in the coming decades, but right now they're not really there. Nature is doing the work, we're not. So we reduce the sources, we help out nature so it can keep removing some greenhouse gases, and third, let's think about our society. And here it turns out there are a lot of things we should do regardless of climate change, a lot of things that would help human rights, reduce poverty, increase the well-being of people across the world. We do that anyway. None of these should be done because of climate change. But it turns out some of the things we should do to make the world better can help us with climate change, especially, let me go back, especially education and healthcare in developing countries, most especially targeting girls and young women. It turns out over history, as young women and girls get more access to education and healthcare and reproductive health, they make different choices. They have many more opportunities. And so they often maybe delay getting married or maybe delay their childbirth years and have fewer but healthier children. So that creates new opportunities for people, but it also bends the curve of future population growth without draconian controls. No one should ever use the words population and control in the same sentence ever again. It's about lifting people up so they make their own choices. And when that happens, we see the world change in really good ways. So we put it together and see how we can get to drawdown. It really kind of looks like this. Here are ways we can reduce the sources of the primary pollution. These circles are all at the same scale across 5 big areas that I mentioned before. We can support nature and its natural carbon sinks. The ones we know how to do are on land. We think we know how to do this on the oceans. Maybe those blue circles could be a lot bigger soon. I hope so. And maybe there are ways we can develop engineering technology to pull carbon out of the air. We have quantified one, which is around biochar, but the rest are still very speculative at this point. When we do that, we can also then add helping society, and this is where access of health and education, especially for girls and young women, can also be a solution. So we put all these together and we can see a whole panoply of solutions: reduce the pollution, help nature, help society. We call it the 3 S's: sources, sinks, and society. And there are 10 areas of action here: 5 sources, 3 sinks, and 1 in society. That's a really good framework to think about fixing climate change. And if we put it together, this is in the original book, which is now kind of out of date in terms of the numbers in it. This is for just one scenario for addressing climate change. This is a scenario where we stop climate change at 2 degrees warmer. We have found ways to get it to 1.5, which is much more aggressive. And depending on how we play out the scenarios, the rankings of these solutions change a lot. But here's just one. Don't memorize these rankings. They actually are very fluid, but it just shows you that things that you might not expect show up as climate solutions. For example, in this one scenario, reducing food waste turned out to be the #1 scenario. Education and healthcare for girls and young women turned out to be number 2. Eating less meat was number 3. Refrigerants was number 4. We only get to energy and fossil fuels by number 6. But it turns out fossil fuels show up about 50 more times down below. We have lots of solutions there, but we also have to think about food and education, refrigerants, materials. The one thing to remember about climate change is there isn't just one thing to solve climate change. We need a lot of solutions, and a lot of them are in energy, but a lot of them are in other places too, and we will need them all. So here's the economics of it too, in case you're curious. This is kind of a weird graph, but it shows the solutions going horizontally, and they stack up to addressing climate change, and the vertical axis is how much they cost. Initially, a lot of these solutions cost money. If they go above the 0 line, they cost something. If they go below it, we save money and make money. So initially, we do have to lay out a lot of money, about $25 trillion over 30 years. The world as a whole would be needed to do this. But let's look at what we save and what we earn. If we spend $25 trillion, which is a lot of money, as a planet over 30 years, we would make between $90 and $140 trillion back in savings and new revenues, hundreds of millions of new jobs, and oh yeah, we saved the planet. And this doesn't even begin to include the cost of doing nothing. The cost of, runaway climate change that gets really bad isn't even included here. So this is a win-win for the economy and for us. And here's what it would look like. The red curve is if we do nothing. The basic forecast is we'd get about 3 degrees warmer than normal if we kept on our current path. Yellow would get us to about 2 degrees warmer, and the green actually gets us to about 1.5 degrees warmer. The point is, we've come up with various scenarios that show that we can actually stop climate change by the mid-2040s through the mid-2060s, depending what we choose. We could, of course, do nothing and go on the red line and never stop climate change, but that's just not a good choice. So here's kind of what that would look like, and here's what the temperatures would show up looking like in those 3 scenarios. Red, we don't do much. Yellow, we do a lot. The green, we go bonkers and do everything we can. And we've shown that, yes, we can stop climate change around 2 degrees or 1.5. Below that probably isn't possible, short of really draconian measures, but this looks like maybe possible. Bottom line here is we do have enough solutions to stop climate change, and they make the world better. They save us money, they create jobs, we get healthier, more secure societies. There's no downside here, unless you're the CEO of ExxonMobil or somebody like that, or Vladimir Putin. There are about 20 people in the world that get screwed. About 7.5 billion of us do better, and that's a good deal. There are a lot of lessons we've learned along the way too. First though, and please remember this, it is not too late to stop climate change. It's too late to stop it at 1 degree, but we can probably stop it at 1.5 to 2. And it's not the best world we could have had. We wasted the last 30 years thanks to our politicians being bought out, but we can stop it now. It is not too late to stop runaway damage. And we can do this using the solutions we have today. Nothing I showed you is science fiction. Everything I'm talking about is off-the-shelf, doable technologies and practices. And we often say at Drawdown, now is better than new. Yes, I would love new technologies, new ways of doing things that Elon Musk or whoever might come up with. That would be great, but we don't have time to waste. Let's deploy everything we've got right now, right here, and then we can talk about new technologies and folding them in. But how do we deploy them? We need to change the rules. We need better policy, better regulation, and better incentives. We have to move a hell of a lot of money out of the bad stuff, like fossil fuels, into the good stuff, like renewables, or from industrial ag to regenerative ag, from bad materials to good materials. We got to shift a lot of capital. We got to change the incentives for business so they think longer term, not short-term profit, but it's long-term prosperity. We could use new technologies that would help. And we also, our individual and collective behavior of the community skill matters too, but we can't do it alone. We need policy and capital and business to change as well. It's all of us. These accelerators, we're going to need to pull all of them. Don't wait just for the Green New Deal or a carbon tax. We'll maybe get that someday, but let's move money. Let's change business. Let's invent technology. Let's do what we can too. Every gram of carbon we don't emit to the atmosphere is a win, and let's do it all. And we have to do it fast. We've got about 3 decades to really solve this thing the way we've laid it out. And we can do it in maybe 3 big ways. First, let's do what we can do now that is sort of the duh stuff. Things that are cost effective, that make you money right away, or things we could stop right now. Those include energy efficiency. That includes stopping food waste and unnecessary deforestation. Like, why the hell are we doing that? Reducing methane leaks from fracking and natural gas pipelines. We might not like the pipelines, but let's at least plug the leaks for now. Can't we do that? These are immediate, like right here, right now, things we should have done 20 years ago, but we still can do right now. And also switching to renewables, because renewables are finally cheaper than fossil fuels. The average price of solar and wind electricity is now cheaper than all other sources in most of the world. So it makes sense to build solar and wind, at least for part of our electrical grid, if not all of it, right now. So that's the stuff we can do today. There are other things we can start today, but are going to take a long time to finish because we've got to update and renew and remodel kind of everything. So this is dealing with big infrastructure, including agriculture, changing every farm on the planet in terms of how they farm, from emitting greenhouse gases to at least stopping that, and maybe even sequestering greenhouse gases. That'll take time to flip over the world's farms and pastures, but let's get started. Same thing with buildings. A new LEED building is great, but we got a bunch of old buildings we got to remodel as well. Retrofitting, deep energy retrofits, heat pumps, everything. We got to do that, but there's billions of buildings in the world. It'll take some time. And of course, transportation. The average car in America right now, we can buy a new Tesla, but for every electric vehicle sold today, we have 16 sport utility vehicles and pickup trucks being sold. It's a 16-to-1 ratio of a non-polluter to a heavy polluter. In our car fleet, and the average American car stays on the road for 17 years. So we're gonna have to flip over all of our transportation infrastructure, every plane, every car, every train, everything. That's going to take a lot of time, and we need to get started now, but it'll be going on forever. And then the third wave of climate solutions may be those technologies we have today, but they're not yet quite cost effective, like new ways of making cement, refrigerants, and steel. That's really important. We know how to do those 3 things, but none of them are quite cost effective yet, but they must be. Also, getting carbon neutral jet fuels. We are not going to stop flying our commercial and military fleets. They might be smaller, but people are going to still want to get around. Can we develop jet fuels, for example, that don't emit any carbon to the atmosphere? The answer is yeah, actually we can. There are ways to grab carbon out of the atmosphere and convert it to a jet fuel, making it a closed loop, or advanced biofuels. We're far from commercial implementation, but there's some interesting pilots for that. So there are a lot of things we can do over the coming decades, and all of them, I think, create incredible opportunities to reimagine the world we have, to have better buildings, better transportation, better food, better ways of getting electricity. This is nothing in here as a sacrifice. It's making the world smarter, better, and more competitive, but also more secure and more sustainable than it's ever been. This is the biggest business opportunity in history, and we're letting it slip by us because the fossil fuel and other industries don't want to talk about it. So if we have solutions and we know what the problem is, we know what the solutions are, what do we really need? I think we need a lot more bold visioning and leadership. A lot of times when we talk about climate change, we talk about the problem and how scary it is. That isn't very inspiring. We need a little dose of fear to wake us up, but to move us to building a better future, we need a different kind of leadership. Martin Luther King didn't go around the country saying, I have a nightmare. But unfortunately, that's a lot of what the environmental community still does. It paints a dystopian vision of future and scares the hell out of people. That doesn't really motivate everybody. It motivates some, but not everybody. Instead, why don't we talk about our dreams, about building a better world that's better for everybody? It's more just, it has more opportunity, it's healthier, more secure, more prosperous, and yes, more sustainable. Let's build a vision of a better world and invite people to join us in building it. That's a leadership I think we need, and unfortunately we've been lacking, at least in our national figures, for a little bit too long. Maybe save Greta, who I think has been a breath of fresh air, who's really helped us. So let me just wrap up, and here's my ask for you. You are already so involved in the climate crisis fight, and I'm so thrilled with everything you do at Climate Reality Project, especially here in Northern California. But continue to learn and share what you're learning. It's so crucial that we keep on doing that. And I hope that Drawdown can be a resource to you. Please follow us, come check us out, and please, please, please go to our new website, entirely new, and add the Drawdown review. It's free. It's a 100-page report. It's free. It's downloadable as a PDF. Doesn't cost you anything. Put it on top of this if you want to print it out or keep it on your computer. It's the latest, and we're going to keep updating it every year. Soon, we don't have it now. I know somebody will ask me this. We also are going to be producing free slide decks for you to use, maybe add to your climate reality talk, focusing about climate solutions. Stay tuned in this space, probably about a month or two from now. That'll be available along with a lot of new infographics. And then later this year, we'll have many more new educational resources as we develop out what we call Drawdown Learn. And soon we'll be actually offering online webinars and courses and many, many more things in the coming year or two. So stay tuned. We hope to have a lot more for you soon. And remember, maybe most of all, that future we fear or we hope for isn't written yet. It takes us to build it. The future is still up for grabs, and the people who act and shape that future are the ones who get to make it. So let's go out there and build a better future and see what we can do with it. So with that, thank you very much, and maybe we can take some questions and comments. See how we're doing on time now.
John, thank you so much for kicking this whole series off. This was a really fantastic talk. I think I love all the data-driven approaches and also seeing the relative sizes. I remember the first time I saw Project Drawdown being just a little overwhelmed by just how many solutions there were. But working in the renewables industry, I'm really seeing massive changes, not only in the price, but also in the efficiency of deployment. And I'm curious about when you look at renewable energies and decarbonizing the energy sector, does it matter? Should we be spending time and energy developing tidal power and developing biomass and some of these less economic ones? Or have we really solved enough with solar and wind that if we deploy those en masse, it doesn't matter so much about the other ones?
I'm going to weasel out of that answer and do it both and. I mean, I think we should be deploying like crazy at a kind of, war footing level, solar, wind, and whatever storage we can that's economically cheaper than the alternatives. I mean, right now on a level market, wind and solar, and even with storage, beats coal and gas. What the hell are we waiting for? We should put every dollar we can right now into that. But I think that won't solve the problem entirely. People love to point out that solar and wind are still intermittent resources at times. That's why you have to build, well, you know this, but not everybody does. If you want to have like more reliable solar and wind, what you do is you produce like 500% of the capacity you might need. So if it drops in half, you still got more than you need. Don't worry about it. Just overbuild it. And what'd you do? You built a few more windmills and a few more solar panels. Big deal. That problem is more solvable than we used to think. Maybe we need to invest in better grid technologies, things like this, to be able to re-engineer the grid. It's long overdue, as you know. Us PG&E customers know this painfully well. A lot of our transmission and grid technologies are bad anyway, and need to be thoroughly updated. But this is, but I don't think that means we should ignore other electricity. I mean, energy isn't a thing, it's electricity that we're talking about here. There's no energy sector, there's an electricity sector. Tidal, biomass, other kinds of ways of generating electricity, sure, why not? I'm not a big fan of nuclear because it's just so bloody expensive, and it's the only energy technology in the West that gets more expensive the more we try to build it. That's weird, but maybe we should be doing R&D in that. But there's deployment and then there's R&D. Don't let the R&D slow down deployment. I don't think we'll regret turning off coal power plants and replacing them with wind. If we come up with something even cheaper 20 years from now, great. Let's replace the wind with whatever, Mr. Fusion or whatever it is. Great, fine, we'll do that. But I think the electricity demands also, we need to produce far more renewable electricity for electrifying our fleets, electrifying our homes, that kind of thing. The really interesting thing to me is the technologies we need that are not yet cost competitive with fossil fuel infrastructure, like heat pumps versus furnaces. When people have asked me, like, where should Jeff Bezos put his $10 billion? I said he should spend it all in the next 6 months or to 18 months right now and buy everybody in the world a heat pump or electric water heater, that kind of thing, and have Amazon install it for you. Because when he does that, that $10 billion can turn into hundreds of billions of dollars later, because he started to make it the economy of scale. If we start building more and more heat pumps, they're going to get cheaper, and then everybody else will buy them. We need things that are near the tipping point of it's all about deployment and time. We need this stuff in the ground now. And if the market can't do it on its own, we need to nudge the market with policy or huge capital investments like that to tip things to being more economical. Then the market will solve it. Markets are good at that. So that's what I think the energy technology is about, the now, not the new.
Fantastic, thank you. And folks in the audience on Zoom, please raise your hand and we can unmute to get your question. Okay, you're unmuted.
Cool, thanks so much. Awesome presentation. So I did notice in the decks you had waste to energy, anaerobic digestion, and I didn't see pyrolysis, but they seem kind of low in magnitude. Mm-hmm. So do these account for the carbon fuel offsets as well as the ancillary benefits that these technologies have, mainly reduced waste and kind of this added value to otherwise garbage?
Yeah. They try to do that. I'd encourage you to go to our website. Each of these solutions is described in detail with a technical document for each one. Usually, 4 or 5 page kind of technical overview. You can download free also, as well as the overview. So yeah, you can see what our assumptions are there. I should tell you how we do our work too, because sometimes people want to dig into the numbers. Let me just give a quick overview of that. Project Drawdown, we basically, we're like the consumer reports for the planet, basically. We don't do our own frontline research in a lab. What we do is we study all of the studies published on all these technologies. It's what's called a meta-analysis. So we kind of study every published study there is. So every year we update thousands and thousands of scientific papers and white papers and so on, and basically statistically analyze what's the impact of this technology? How big could it be for every investment we make in it? How much carbon does it prevent? What does it cost, and what does it cost to operate? So we do this across 100 or so solutions, and that's what we kind of get. So when we present numbers, it's not us making a judgment as much as it is, this is what the scientific and engineering and policy literature seems to be saying right now. The cool thing is every year these all get a little better and get a little cheaper. So that's why we have to keep updating this. That's why we're not going to do books anymore. This got obsolete within a year, pretty much, because the world changes and we got better at this stuff. So we're going to basically annually update these solutions and add more and more and more. So yeah, like our pyrolysis stuff is in the biochar solution. You'll see written up. Some of the biochar advocates kind of criticize us saying, hey, wait, you're not including cogeneration of electricity while we're making pyrolysis. I'm like, yeah, but nobody has a demonstrated scaled effort to do that. We can't evaluate projects until they're done in the real world and have been assessed by a third party. So we're very careful about that. So if anything, a lot of our solutions are probably underestimates of what they could do and probably overestimating their cost. So if anything, the pictures I've shown might be a little bit pessimistic. They might be better. So I kind of agree with you. I think our waste to energy stuff maybe more there than there's there. But that's why we get the numbers we do, and we'll be updating that.
So we had a couple people chat and ask questions during the presentation. A lot of questions about whether or not the slides would be accessible later. So yeah, we are recording this presentation and we're also live on Facebook right now. So it should save to the Facebook group, and we'll also have a recording available for our chapter members.
Well, let me try to answer that. What we want to do is we're going to be giving a lot of talks like this ourselves too, and eventually producing some videos that will be free for everybody to use, where we have our own slides and we'll be explaining them along the way, right? We aren't yet at the point like the Climate Reality Project is of doing a 2-day training of 500 people or whatever, and giving you all slides and making sure you know exactly what's in them. That costs a lot of money, it turns out, and we don't have it. So what we're hoping to do is start with a smaller slide deck of things that are kind of basic stuff and writing a careful explanation of what's in there and let it out in the world and see how it does. And then maybe a month later, okay, here are a few more slides. And we want to kind of unfold it a little at a time. Actually, we'd love to use you all as a guinea pig group for that, if you don't mind, or some of you. So we'll be talking to Deborah and others about maybe how we can pilot some of that with you. But we're working on it. In fact, that's something we're hoping to do within the next, well, I'll say 2 months. Might be sooner than that. But we've always intended to give out slides. Unfortunately, it was really funny. People asked us some slides from the original book and we couldn't do it. It's not because we're jerks, but all the photos and everything in here were, we got permission to use them for the book and our own presentations, but we'd be breaking copyright law. We didn't buy the rights to the photos to give them to a third party. We'd get lawyers on our ass, so we couldn't do it. This time, all the new Drawdown stuff, everything you see on the website, all the photos in the Drawdown review, all the figures are now in the public domain, or we own the rights to them fully and outright. So we will give them away. No charge, but we just want to do it carefully so people don't misinterpret what we're trying to say. So yes, very soon, slide decks, PowerPoint and Keynote. We'll try to make them look like our stuff, but you saw we do like a black background, we'll do a white background, whatever you want. We'll make a few different flavors, but hopefully it'll blend very nicely. And we also, in 2 of the big climate reality big trainings that Al Gore and his team do, we actually joined 2 of them last year to do a training on Drawdown as well, and it's by far the most popular breakout session. In fact, the fire marshal shut us down both times. So we need to get us on the main stage after Gore next time, but we'll see how it goes. So yes, we're on it. We're also going to be developing more community resources and things. We'd love to hear from you later about how we can do a better job on that, but we've heard this call and we want to rise to it. So stay tuned, we're on it.
Fantastic.
Mine's not a question, and it's really not even fair. It's more of an observation in a way, and it really is. I think it would inspire a whole new discussion, and we're so early in it. But my question at first was more of an observation that the long-term economic picture as a result of coronavirus is going to present huge challenges and opportunities in the whole climate crisis mitigation picture.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, how are you guys thinking about that? But I mean, did you start yet today? It's so in the moment that it's not a fair question, but I just feel like it could bring us to a new flex point entirely. And whether the global community chooses to accelerate or to retract really remains to be seen. And I just think it's a huge situation that's coming up. And then if you sort of boil it down as like, how can people like climate reality leaders ever try to influence the way people choose going forward? This is sort of, it feels like a life-changing thing we're going through to me. So this feels like a whole different discussion. So I was like, please don't call my name, but you did. So I'm just sort of throwing that out there because I feel like it's, we're really on the cusp of a very big flex point that we weren't expecting.
Sure. Well, I don't know any more than anybody else does, of course, on this stuff. Anybody who says they do is fooling themselves. But history shows that every time we have an economic retraction, emissions go down and change. The world changes after every major recession. And this is more than a recession, it's a public health crisis, but there will be a recession, if not a depression with this too. In fact, the United States, a lot of people don't know this, but our emissions peaked in the year 2007 and have been going down every year ever since. We retooled, we got more efficient, we got rid of coal. This includes methane. This does include exporting stuff to China. It's even accounting for all that. The US has substantially grown its economy and even its population while reducing our emissions at the same time. In fact, 40 countries in the world are reducing their emissions every year. China will be this year and probably was going to be anyway. So that's kind of interesting. The coronavirus is not the way we should try to address climate change. This is not a good day for anybody. Anybody who celebrates this as good for the planet, I don't know. Stop.
I mean, think about, like, I mean, the coal companies in this country are trying to get in on that $2 trillion bill that's being passed.
But they're just going to lose in the long run anyway. I'm not. That's
just hope we don't retrench. I just hope that the globe doesn't retrench.
I don't think it will, personally, but I try to be an optimist. I think this will shake people a bit. We're certainly going to be telecommuting better in the future. We all learned about Zoom recently at work and everything, or WebEx or whatever you use. I think it's going to rethink, maybe people's values will shift about like, hey, what's really important to us might be a little different. Maybe reality TV will be less important and our lives might be more.
The right leadership would help.
Yeah, it would, wouldn't it? But I'm looking at a whole bunch of leaders on my screen right now.
Okay.
I'm not looking at C-SPAN, I'm looking at you. These are the leaders we need. The White House is not, I mean, look, who are the real leaders in the world right now changing the way we think and the way we act? It's not Washington. They've never led, they've followed, or they've been bribed. Let's remember where leadership is. It's in our towns and our communities, our businesses, our places of faith, our schools, our communities. It's everywhere. And you know, don't forget, like in California and New York, we have incredible leaders. We have the most ambitious climate plans on earth, are the laws of California and New York State, not Washington. The hell with that. It's here. And California and New York are 1/4 of the US economy right there. And we have incredible leadership in companies today. Many companies used to think, I don't want to deal with that, it might cost me money. But now we have incredible leadership in a lot of firms saying, no, we're not going to just be carbon neutral. We'll go beyond that. Companies like Microsoft and Intuit, Ingersoll Rand, others that are really stepping up. So I hope, maybe I'm naive, but I hope this might be a little bit of a wake-up call to the world about like what's important. Health,
so
absolutely, but maybe more than that.
Okay.
Let's see what we can do. Yeah.
I know we're
Let's just wrap up with one last
Mm-hmm.
question. I'd love to unmute Fabrice. He had a really fantastic question in the notes. So we'll wrap up with this one and really appreciate having you for these extra couple of minutes. Okay,
Yeah.
Fabrice, you should be unmuted.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hey.
Okay. Hi, Fabrice Florin with greenchange.net. My question is, how much of global warming is caused by individual consumers rather than institutions?
Mm-hmm.
And how important is consumer education? You had behavior really low on the list of actions we needed to take. And for those of us who are kind of trying to get individual consumers to take productive actions, what is the best way that we can engage them? And is it important for us to do that? Or should we instead be focusing on convincing leaders to take action? So
Yeah. That's a great question. I think about that a lot, actually. Thanks for asking that. And I love following you on social media, by the way. You're great. Good. Thank you. Everybody should follow him. But the list of like the things we need to do to accelerate solutions wasn't meant to be in priority. They're just kind of a random order. I type them in. There is no ranking there at all. So don't think culture is more important than policy or vice versa. They're all important. I actually think personal engagement is really important, kind of voting with your pocketbook. And first of all, you're an early adopter. You're helping everybody. You're helping the economy make these things cheaper. So when you buy like an LED light bulb, you're making it cheaper for the next person as well. You're creating that economy of scale. Or electric vehicles, and you're saving yourself money. So first of all, you're helping yourselves, your pocketbook. You're helping direct emissions to the planet. You're helping the next person make it a little bit cheaper. You're creating that kind of market response curve that we need. And you're signaling socially and politically, you're putting your money where it matters. And, I think all of you live in California probably, right? People say, no, don't worry about consumer behavior because that doesn't matter. What you should do is vote. I'm like, really? I live in California. My vote absolutely does not freaking matter at all when it comes to the White House, thanks to the bloody Electoral College. My vote, whatever, a Democrat will win California. I don't care who it is. Nancy Pelosi will still be Congress. Kamala Harris will still be there, and Gavin Newsom. My vote doesn't matter at the polling place. I still vote, but my personal emissions changes, buying the next electric car, insulating my apartment, that matters technically probably more from an individual here in California. Now, if you're a voter in Michigan or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, you might have a little more power. But you know what I mean? The Electoral College doesn't, make some of us powerless politically, but it doesn't make your pocketbook powerless. So I think we need it all. There's a really good organization called RARE, just the word rare.org. They actually took the drawdown solutions from the original book and then asked how many of them could be affected by behavior change at the personal level. And they came up with about 1/3 of it was behavior, like food waste. Well, that's up to me. Right? What you do with the food you buy and you cook and you eat and that kind of thing, or your diet, or what kind of car you're going to buy. Now, policy might nudge you there better, but actually most of those decisions are made at the personal to other levels. So I think it's a continuum. I think it's from our personal lives to our communities, but don't forget where you work. Don't forget the schools you and your family members go to, your places of worship, your community organizations. You can affect change there too. And also social media. We're all now media broadcasters today, right? So I think personal behavior change is a huge thing. For me, I actually started doing this in 1999, before the new millennium, whatever. Made a new, instead of a New Year's resolution, you can only make a new millennium resolution every so often. So we did that, and my family, we just said, we're gonna cut our CO2 emissions that we control, electricity, heating, transportation, things in our home. We were gonna cut that in half. And we thought that was gonna be a big, bold goal compared to the average Wisconsinite. I lived in Madison, Wisconsin at the time. So we actually cut it by 70%. I'm like, wow, this is great. We're like heroes. Then I realized we're like the average German. Or, I'm like, what the hell? So that mattered a lot, but it meant like we didn't sacrifice anything. We saved money, we lived better lives in a more comfortable house with better, everything. So yeah, we can do a lot, but we do need policy. We do need capital, we do need business, and we need technology. No one of those systems can do it alone. But yeah, don't forget your individual power, but don't put it all on you either. Now I'm pretty good at my personal carbon footprint. My work carbon footprint used to be really crappy because I would fly a lot to talk about climate change because there was no other way to reach people. Now there is. There are things like this that are far, far more efficient. So I'm going to be doing a lot more talks this way and have been for a couple of years now. So trying to do that too, but that's a policy issue that's kind of bigger than you. So on one hand, do everything you can, but give yourself a bit of a break for the things you can't. We're all part of a larger system. So let's vote, let's change the system, and let's change what we do at home. I think it's a little hypocritical to put all of it into one place. It's a big complex system with multiple levels, and we got to change all of them. And guess what? They're good for us. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I know we're pretty much up for time. There were a lot more questions, quite a few around the impact of COVID-19.
Yeah.
I'm with you in, there is nothing good about people dying.
Nope.
While it's interesting to see big changes, it's awful stuff we're going through. We are actually, for everyone on the call, doing an event fairly soon on that. It's going to be a chapter meeting, so keep your eye out for the next newsletter on that. In the meantime, this will be broadcast available on our Facebook channel. And I just can't thank you enough, Dr. Foley, for kicking this event off with such a deep and interesting look at everything that's going on there. I think everyone should log on and grab the new Drawdown review, see what's new there, and there's just a lot of great data to go wallow in. And meanwhile, I'm going to throw out all the rice I bought.
Oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that. No food waste.
Yeah.
Just
no food waste.
keep
Okay.
the prices fine. If I could ask one last thing, if I, in return for giving a talk, if I could ask you all a little favor, if you could maybe take a look at the new Drawdown review and our new website, and maybe share it with folks if you can. If you're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you like, please do that. I'd really appreciate it. We don't have a big budget. We don't have any government funding. We're not getting a bailout from like the airline industry. And like you all know, small nonprofits, especially during a recession, are a little thin. So we kind of depend on our friends to help spread the word and do what we can. So if you could help us out that way, that'd be deeply appreciated. But only if it makes sense to you. But thank you for considering it. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Good,
and thank you everyone for joining us. And we'll send you information about our upcoming events. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night.